Is up, y'all? Welcome back to episode 80 of That's No Moon Pod. Episode 7 of The Acolyte just dropped. Got a lot to talk about with this episode. Basically, it felt like a director's cut of episode 3, where we get this whole backstory of the twins, Osha and May, kind of seeing how they were brought up with these witches and their whole tribe. But this episode, we're pretty much getting the Jedi's point of view for the most part, to where Sol, Torben, Kalnaka, and Trinity are doing some kind of reconnaissance mission to where there's supposed to be some kind of vergence in the force on this planet that's supposed to be lifeless at this point. And I was curious to see what exactly was going to go down, because this whole series been pretty much leading up to this moment to where we're supposed to find out what exactly did the Jedi do. Why does Soul feel like he has so much regret and just overall disappointment in himself, I guess, for what he did? I don't know what it is, but the show's not good. And if you're digging it, that's great. That's awesome. But the more and more I watch this show, it feels like a show that was pitched as something else and was later turned into whatever the hell it is that we're getting right now. I see a lot of people commenting on the posts on Twitter, always asking the same questions pretty much, especially regarding the whole budget of the show. $180 million. People wondering, where did the budget go? And I'm thinking that this show, again, was pitched as something else, like it originally was, talking about us seeing the workings of the Sith and kind of how they operate, and maybe just kind of how they're able to gain so much power in secrecy while the Jedi are roaming around still in their prime. And I think that someone stepped in and said, we can't have this. This isn't going to be as kid friendly as we want it to be, or this just isn't the direction that we want to be going in with this show. So I think that they had already done so much pre production in this show, and then things got changed. And then that's when they decided to add this whole twin element in the show. Because I remember when the show was first pitched, that's kind of what the original idea was, that it was going to be about these Sith and the whole thing about the Acolyte, probably with the Rule of Two. That's why some people had already considered Darth Plagueis making an appearance. Um, and then these leaks came out a few months before the show had gotten a bunch of trailers and whatnot. And they were talking about how it was going to be something of these two twins, that where one is good and then one kind of falls into the dark side. And then you could pretty much guess how the show was pretty much going to end after that point. Someone's probably still going to get redeemed, whether it's Osha or May, but the show's just kind of been so all over the place that you kind of don't really care at this point. And with only one episode left, I'm curious to see how exactly they're gonna wrap this thing up, especially with us getting this whole flashback episode that we just got. And a lot of things just don't make that much sense, to be honest, in this episode. We got Torben, who's basically homesick, and he just wants to get back to Coruscant. And Soul discovers the twins, like we saw in episode 3. He's trying to tell everyone that there are these witches and these tribes that are living in this mountain. We got to go do something because I fear for their safety. And they're all deciding what to do exactly. Trinity winds up listening to Saul, bringing the whole crew to the witch's hut, palace, whatever. And they decide to interfere with the whole ceremony that they got going on with the twins. And again, that's why I said this was kind of like a director's cut of episode 3, because we did get a lot of new footage, but we also got a lot of the same scenes and a lot of moments that we had already seen or basically already knew about prior. One of the main things was whenever the Jedi go and interrupt the ceremony, and the main witch gets into Torben's mind, and she's basically telling him, what do you want? What are you doing here? Ask me what you want, blah, blah, blah. And I thought this was an interesting scene. I thought it was kind of cool to see that whole aspect of the witch getting into Torben's mind. But again, this dude just wants to go back to Coruscant at the end of the day, which is all right. He said that they've been on this planet looking for this Virgins for 7 weeks at this point, which is crazy. So I could understand he's kind of just getting a little tired of all this, not really any much action going on up until this point. And so they get back to the ship or whatnot. They're about to test on the twins again, like we had already seen. And Torben takes blood samples from both the twins. May, of course, fails on purpose, but she decides to tell Trinity all these things that the witches said about what they promised with their whole ceremony and what they intend to do. And that kind of raised some suspicions in their minds once again. And a little bit later on, we're seeing that Torben was testing the blood. Their M count, midichlorian count, is obviously very high, but they kind of have like the same DNA structure, even though they're two different people. They're kind of pretty much the same person in a way. So they're of course wondering, well, how were these kids made in the first place? Um, and that's when Torben decides that I'm gonna take it into my own hands. We just found the virgins, and I'm trying to go home, so I'm gonna speed off without y'all's permission to go grab these twins, which was kind of abrupt, to say the least. Um, Again, Torben's whole thing is that he just wants to go back to Coruscant. So if that's pretty much the reason why all this went down in the first place, then I'm not sure things would have went down the way they did. Because Soul feels like he has this attachment to Osha. He wants to save her, specifically Osha, and he feels like she was destined to be his Padawan. But he's not acting too out of pocket. He's still listening to Trinity, even after that they got word from the Jedi Council that they shouldn't interfere. They should just carry on with their mission. But Soul follows Torben back to the witch's palace, and they decide to scale the mountain to get in. And again, this is kind of a lot of the stuff that we had seen, but this is also kind of where the episode kind of gets a little wild, I guess I should say, but not in a good way. There's some acting choices and some directing choices that kind of make you laugh out loud, if I'm being honest. There's a moment to where, I guess the big moment to where Torben and Soul are back inside the palace, and the main witch mother and the other mother are all there, kind of standing, surrounded by a bunch of other witches with bow and arrows or whatnot. And at this point, May had already set fire to the outside of where Osha is staying inside that room. And the Zabrak mom was getting May all riled up, telling her to get pissed off and go do some crazy stuff for whatever reason. And May comes out running, saying, "There's a fire, just started a fire, or whatnot. I need your help." And this is where the main witch mother goes into like this black mist, dark witch magic thing out of nowhere, and kind of starts to do the same thing to May, like slowly starting to like disintegrate into like the smoke. And it looked pretty creepy, if I'm being honest. And that's when we see Soul bust out his lightsaber and stab the main witch mother. And then she kind of just goes back to normal. And he's like, "What was that?" And she tells him that she was going to let Osha go with them, pretty much just making Soul feel like the bad guy because he may have jumped to conclusions and took matters in his own hand and stabbed her and killed her when she was just going to let them go in the first place. But, he didn't know that in the moment. And, you're seeing this woman turn into this dark mist out of nowhere after seeing what she did to Torben not that long ago. It would be safe to assume that whatever's going on with this chick is not good. So I'm gonna just put an end to it right now because this could be a threat to not only May but also to Soul and Torben once again. So I don't really fault Soul for stabbing her whenever she decided to just bust out that dark magic out of nowhere. And then there's this moment to where the Zabrak mother, she yells out to May, she's like, "Run!" And she gets all pissed off and decides to fight Soul with her spear or whatnot, and Soul's just kind of dodging her, not really fighting back. And this Zabrak mother, just her delivery and her trying to seem like she's angry or mad, just it didn't it didn't look that good on screen, if I'm being honest. Like her trying to act pissed off or whatnot, it just didn't seem intimidating to me. Um, Again, that could be just the overall direction of this show or of this episode, but um, in my head, I was laughing quite a bit when she was trying to act intimidating the Soul. Meanwhile, Torben, he's twirling his lightsaber, deflecting all these arrows that are getting shot at them. And then this moment happens to where they're talking to the Jedi, saying they're going to get in their head once again. And they're all like, well, it's not going to work on us. And then we see that Kelnaka, the Wookiee Jedi, he winds up getting his mind zapped by these witches, and he starts to go after Soul and Torben. We get like this handicap match, lightsaber battle between the three of them. And this is one of those things I was saying earlier to where these just get really weird. And we keep cutting to all these witches sitting next to each other in these like rows. And they're all kind of like swinging back and forth with their eyes closed, implying that they're the ones who are taking control over Kalnaka's mind. But it's just the way that they look, the way that they're just kind of swinging back and forth. And again, it could just be the direction or just the overall execution of the things. But this is again one of those things that where I was just kind of laughing in my mind on just how kind of ridiculous it looked. It didn't look creepy. It didn't look intimidating, or it didn't even look cool. If I'm being honest, it just kind of looked dumb, to be honest. And they're going in a battle. Them three, Kalnaka, he's about to kill Torben. We see that's how he winds up getting that nasty scar across his face from fighting Kalnaka. And then Trinity swoops in and she kind of gets a hold of Kalnaka and is using her force abilities on his mind. And once she's able to get Kalnaka under control once again, all the witches pretty much just die and they all pass out from, I guess, using too much of their energy trying to take control over Kalnaka, which again I thought was weird and abrupt. And they all fall down just kind of like a sack of potatoes. And the whole mountain is getting burnt to a crisp, starting to explode, and Soul has to go find Osha and May. And this is again kind of something that we had seen in episode 3. But we're finally seeing the decisions that Soul is having to make during these moments, to where Osha and May, they're on that bridge that got separated, and we see that Soul is trying to hold up the separated bridge with the force. He's got like one arm stretched out towards May and one stretched out towards Osha, and he's struggling to keep up with not letting this whole both of the bridges just crumble down. So he decides to let go of the bridge that May is standing on and decides to focus in on Osha. And that's when he kind of swoops in and grabs Osha before she pummels down on the ground. So he made a conscious decision to let May die pretty much from what we had presumed, or maybe what they had presumed, and decided to save Osha and take her back to the ship and eventually wind up training her to be his Padawan. And again, this was another one of those moments that I've seen a lot on the comments saying, well, why is Soul trying to hold up both of these bridges when what he should have done was pretty much just plucked both of them up with the force? They probably weigh no more than 70 pounds, these two girls. Instead of trying to hold up these bridges, he could have just grabbed them both with the force and wound up saving them, instead of having to try to keep both of these bridges upright. And he could have just grabbed them both with the force. Probably would have been a lot easier. And even when he lets go of May, Osha starts falling down and he decides to jump into action and physically grab her instead of, again, using the force to just pluck her out of the air. And I could totally see those arguments to why, or yeah, why he decided not to do that in the first place. That's what I mean about just some of the writing choices that have been made in the show, to where, look, at this point they're not even nitpicky. They're, I think, legit criticisms on the writing and a lot of the directing choices, to where just a lot of things that these characters are deciding to do not make sense. They don't make sense for the character, and they just don't make sense for an overall, like, why would that even happen? Why would that person do that? Or like, where did that even come from? And all these things just kind of add up throughout the whole series. And at this point, there's just so many things that have been going on that it just doesn't feel like a congruent story. It just feels like almost like they didn't know what they wanted to do at certain points, or maybe they did at one point, but then things got thrown in from whoever, and they were trying to make something work out of what they already had with these other story notes that were getting thrown into them later. And that's pretty much the end of the episode. But one of the other things that I found pretty ridiculous, and a lot of people did as well, the end credit song, which I'm not going to play because a lot of people have been getting copyrighted claims right away just from playing this outro song of this episode. It's like this poppy song about the twins, or just the song just does not fit at all with Star Wars. And this song choice, and I'm not gonna say it's a bad or the worst song I've ever heard. Never mind all that. It's just the fact that they decided to throw in this pop song at the end of a Star Wars TV series. Like, what? How does that choice just get made right there and then? To where, like, who approved that? It seems like a, it just does not fit with this whole universe to throw in some poppy song. Could understand maybe if it was like some kind of alien speaking language, or it kind of had like this Star Wars esque beat to it, but there's literally like hi hats and drum kicks and just modernized pop style music at the end of this show. So this whole episode was just kind of, again, another reason why I think the show is getting the reviews it's been getting. This episode definitely didn't do it any more favors, and the fact that it was a complete flashback episode for the penultimate of the series. Next week is the finale. I don't know what the hell they're going to do with wrapping this show up. I'm hoping that things get definitive and kind of come to a close, because I do not think that this show is going to get a season two. So if they decide to leave episode 8 on a cliffhanger as well, which I've heard that there's a possibility that it will, I think the show is going to be looked back on as just another reason why I think Disney just doesn't have a grasp on what Star Wars is, what they even want to do, and something has just got to change, because this whole show should have been about the Sith, and we could have been following Soul and Jecki, who I thought went out way too soon. I think Daphne Keane was a great actress. Her character had a lot more depth than both of the twins combined. I remember hearing something that Amanda Lestenberg didn't even have to audition for the show, that she pretty much just got it handed to her. So that could be another thing to what I was saying, to where this show seemed like it was pitched as one thing and then wound up being this whole thing about the twins. And that's kind of where she stepped in. And the twins are easily the worst part of the show. The characters just don't do anything for me at all. I think Soul and Jackie and the stranger, Chimere, they're easily the most interesting part of the show. And that's what we should have really been focusing on, instead of this whole thing with these twins and these witches. Because the more and more that they try to do with them, it feels like the more and more it's like either breaking canon or affecting canon, making the whole thing with Anakin being the chosen one not as cool or as important. Uh, there's just so many things that have been going on with the show, and it's about time that Lucasfilm starts listening to the fans more. You don't got to listen to everything that we say, but you got to look at the response that the show has gotten and take the feedback and do something about it. Because right now, people are laughing at this show, and there are people that are enjoying it, but right now, you're getting House of Dragon, The Boys, The Bear. You're getting all these shows out around the same time, and people are laughing at y'all's. So something's got to happen. Next week is the finale. We'll see how that goes. But until next week, y'all stay safe, and I'll catch y'all on the flip. Peace.